We women must organize. We must learn to work together. We have all, rich and poor, happy and unhappy, worked so long and so exclusively for men, we hardly know how to work for one another. But we must learn. So says Elizabeth Robbins in her 1907 novel, The Convert.
In other words, the vision of an interconnected Europe where passengers and products could travel efficiently from one country to the next was not exclusive to Western European financiers or bureaucrats. It was a vision that involved many different independent actors and planners from across the continent, all the way to Constantinople. This thesis is not merely significant to how we imagine the Orient Express, nor how we understand the late Ottoman Empire. It also implicates the assumptions that underlie our current discourses of modernity and Europe. Today, as borders close and identities harden, it is increasingly difficult to imagine a Europe that ever included Muslims or Turks. The historiographic problem of the Ottoman railroad reformer is symptomatic of a larger discourse that confines the modern to the West, that frames non-Western engagement with modern technology, like a truck or a plane, as necessarily perverse. It reifies a Eurocentric understanding of cosmopolitanism that excludes religious, racial, and geographic others. By telling the story of Ottoman railroad reformers, and thence complicating narratives of science, industry, and progress more generally, we can begin to reinterpret European modernity more accurately and inclusively than before.
Thesis project, I'm looking at a population of South Asian domestic workers living in London at the turn of the 20th century. I'm interested in the way that population was imagined in the wider British consciousness in that period, approximately between 1887 and 1937. And as I move through sources, I'm asking about the ways in which the migratory Aya citizenship is described, her relationship to the state, who is responsible for the regulation of the Aya's status, what is the nature of the employment between Ayas and their employees and their employers upon reaching Britain. And I'm asking more largely how the Aya, who's this kind of legible but ambiguous figure, becomes part of Britain's understanding of its own empire at this kind of early 20th century moment.
In 2004, a plan was put forth by then UN Secretary General Kofi Annan for reunification. A referendum was held on this item, and it passed overwhelmingly on the Turkish Cypriot side and failed fairly spectacularly in the Greek south. At the same time, the Republic of Cyprus, that is the state that now formally occupies the south, became a member of the European Union. My initial question was to look at why this reunification plan failed and why there still seemed to be a public support for the idea of reunification.
Imagine this. Yesterday marks 1 month from the fall of the Berlin Wall. Today is the UN's Human Rights Day, and tomorrow is December 11th, 1989, the first day of the 11th Congress of the League of Communists of Croatia. You've heard rumors that the Socialist Republic of Croatia might drop socialist from its name and hold free multi-party elections. As a member of the League of Communists, the only legal political party in the country of Yugoslavia, you've been involved in elite party structures, but if communism becomes democracy, those structures won't exist anymore. What will you do next? My thesis is situated in the aftermath of Croatia's regime change and declaration of independence from Yugoslavia in the early 1990s. In examining what happened to the former regime's political elite, my thesis is informed by sociological literature written on elite circulation and reproduction.
And as Adam Zworcy argues, we still do not know why and when people with guns obey people without them, the determinants of civilian control over the military. Specifically, the 3 cases I study, Chile, Thailand, and Turkey, you see the tremendous challenge of establishing this form of control.
My thesis investigates an aspect of a phenomenon known as the Cultural Cold War, when U.S. foreign policy overlapped with and even fueled cultural and artistic production in post-war America. Throughout the first 2 decades of the Cold War, the U.S. government covertly dedicated vast resources to cultural endeavors. Managed by the Central Intelligence Agency, which funneled its funds through various major philanthropies, The purpose of this cultural campaign was to stop communism from gaining any traction within the intellectual and educated elite of Western Europe.
It is close to 5 o'clock, and after a backpack's worth of condom distribution, the NGO social worker and I are about to head in for the day when we run into Joy. The first time we had met during street outreach, after convincing her that I was neither the police nor there to verify her documents, Joy had greeted me with a welcoming bees to each cheek. Now she looks worn and small, reluctant to join her madame, the term for a female Nigerian pimp, and fellow Nigerians up the sidewalk to wait for passing clients. Are things okay? No, things are not fine. I don't want to do this work. A part of me shrivels each time I hear this. I know the response by heart, but ask anyways. What instead? Cleaning work, anything else, just as soon as she gets her documents. Asylum documents I know she's unlikely to receive. She faces me expectantly, as if not wanting me to leave. We are the same age, both native English speakers planted in the foreign landscape of southern France. Except while I receive a university grant to do work that I love, Joy and many other young Nigerian women working the streets of Marseille want out with no clear solution.
I am from Greece. I was born and raised in Athens, and I knew I wanted to do something for my senior thesis that had to do with the refugee crisis, but more specifically, the production of images around the refugee crisis, how refugees are portrayed by artists, by media, and also how they choose to portray themselves. My background is sort of in ethnography and visual ethnography and ethnographic filmmaking, and sort of the power structures that come into play as soon as a camera or vision is introduced. In the foreground, you have the camp in Chios at Suda. It houses approximately 1,000 refugees, mostly male. In the midground, very terrible conditions. It's an unofficial refugee camp run by the municipality as opposed to the official one, which is more of a detention center a few miles outside. So it's in the port of the city. In the midground, you see the old Genoese castle on the port of the island, where interestingly enough, the Greek refugees that were expelled from Turkey in the 1920s and emigrated to this island from Turkey, the sort of refugee ghetto was in the moat of this island in the 20s, and now it is the place where the refugee camp is housed again. Further back, we have a cruise ship from Turkey where people will come for the day, do their shopping, and then come back. And that really got me thinking about just like what the mobility at play here. And then further back, you see Çeşme, which is 6 kilometers off the coast. And because of the proximity of the two islands, or the main Turkish mainland and the island, it's one of the main refugee hotspots. That's me in the camp not taking photos. So I decided that the only way to really go about interacting with photography with the power imbalances so skewed was to teach photography and sort of put the onus of the image making and the production of the images in the hands of the people who are in the situation themselves.